Show. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Mike Petraglia. Trag, so great to have you back after the Bruins take down the Hurricanes 5-2 in Game 6. To tie the series, there will be a Game 7. The series just keeps going back and forth. It's like the 2011 Stanley Cup Finals all over again, Trags. So
It
everybody's
is.
comparing it to you. Every team's winning at home. It all comes down to that huge Game 7. And Trags, I'm really excited to kind of get your take on all of this and this series, but mainly, obviously, Game 6 this past night. And there were a lot of good things in this game for the Bruins. I don't think there were many bad aspects to this game at all. We'll start with the power play, right? That was kind of the thing at the end of the season. The power play was terrible. I think they went 0 for 41 to end the season. They weren't terrific against the Hurricanes in the first few games. And then tonight, just first two goals on the power play cashing in. I mean, you look at some of those goals and the fact that they actually got them and that they got the first goal. How surprised were you at that development?
Well, I thought it was great that the Bruins scored early in that second period because I thought both teams, it's the cliche, but I thought it was true in the first period. They were feeling each other out, didn't want to make the first mistake. It almost felt like an overtime game for the Bruins
Yes.
in that first period because you got the sense if Carolina scored first, which they had in the first 5 games of this series, it was going to be trouble. And you had the sense that Carolina was looking for a reason to really put the Bruins to bed on this night on their home ice. And when Marchand scored 46 seconds into the second period, the whole energy of the game shifted, and the whole energy, obviously, the building shifted. And then you mentioned the power play goal late in the second period. That was a huge moment. But I thought certainly Brad Marchand's goal early within the first minute of the second period really set the tempo of that second period for the Bruins.
Again, I'm surprised the Bruins haven't had more of those kind of goals that Marchand scored, the snipe over the glove. I mean, Antti Ranta, again, I know Hurricanes fans, and I know Ranta is a solid backup, but he is a backup goalie. I would expect to see that more. But again, that shows how important that first goal is against a team like Hurricanes. I texted this to you during the game. I even tweeted it. The Hurricanes are such a different team when they are playing from behind and when they're ahead. Because when they're ahead, they command the game. They make they make up for they capitalize on your mistakes, little things like that. When they're playing from behind, they look like a team that's playing from behind, whether it be taking stupid penalties or even just scrums after the whistle or just not winning puck battles. And there's such a different mentality. And maybe it's the camera work. Like they pan to Rod Brindamore on the bench, who just looks dejected. But again, they don't seem like a very mentally tough team. And I think that, again, like, we'll get to it in a little bit, but they got to score first in Game 7. They have to. Like, I think whoever scores first in Game 7 wins the game. I don't think that's like a crazy
Well, you go
thing to
back
think.
to 2011, like you said at the top of the podcast, that in Game 7 in Vancouver, the Bruins scored first and completely took all of the air out of Vancouver's home ice that night back in June of 2011. And it really meant all the difference in the world. I think the same will be true in Game 7 in this series. I think you're right on the money. The team that scores first and can put that first puck behind the goaltender is going to have a huge psychological advantage. What I want to talk about, Evan, and I'm sure you're going to do this, is I want to talk about the difference between the Bruins taking advantage of a 5-on-3 in game number 4 at TD Garden and evening the series at 2-2, and Carolina not being able to do that in game number 6. To me, right now, that stands as really the pivot of this series. And if the Bruins can win Game 7, you go back to what the Carolina Hurricanes were unable to do and what the Bruins penalty kill did under incredibly intense and difficult and strenuous situation in that second period. To me, that was the difference in the game.
I 100% agree. I also look back, if you're talking series, I think that Charlie Coyle shorthanded goal in Game 3 was absolutely massive. Again, I know the Bruins lost Game 5, but I think that shorthanded goal really did shift the series, or at least put the Bruins back in the series. Because I mean, those first two, the Bruins were never remotely close to being in this series. That kind of shifted it. I agree, though. That was my next thing, actually, the penalty kill. Brandon Carlo and Derek Forbert were out for the entirety of that penalty kill, just stood back there and blocked shot after shot. Again, you're right. It comes down to capitalizing on those chances. And you've watched this whole series, as has everybody. There have been tons of special teams, tons of 5-on-3s, tons of obviously 5-on-4s. And I think, again, like as you said, you've got to capitalize on that 5-on-3 if you're the Hurricanes. I mean, just and from the Bruins' perspective, for them to capitalize on it in Game 4 was huge. And I keep going back to that. Like, that really did shift Game 6 so much. That absolutely changed it. And it's wild though, Shrikes, by how much has been called penalties wise. It doesn't feel like playoff hockey in that sense.
No, it doesn't. And it's hard to get a sense for what's going to be called and what's not, except for the obvious penalties, the high stick to Bergie's face, face shield,
Well,
and the
yeah.
on the eye. I mean, that's an obvious penalty, and they're not going to miss that, you would hope. But you also don't want to see what Brad Marchand did late in Game 6, and that is take a stupid spearing penalty, because that is going to give, I think, Carolina the possibility of having some juice heading into Game 7. And and yes, Carolina scored on that power play, but forget the fact that it was 5-2 instead of 5-1. You want to see discipline from the Bruins. For the most part, one of the big reasons the Bruins were able to win Game 6 is they kept their discipline. They kept their heads about them. Even when Carolina was putting on that push in the third period, in the first 5 minutes, it's cliche, but it's true. A team like Carolina down 2-0 is going to put on a push like they did in the first 5 minutes of the third period. They got some momentum. They got a hold of the game. Obviously, they scored the first goal of the third period, Savenkov's goal, his second of the series, at 3:24, and you go, oh boy, here they come. And the Bruins were able to answer that and hold on for dear life. And the fact that they were able to really keep their head about them, even after Carolina made it 2-1, really, to me, was a huge part of this game.
Yeah, you go back to that early third period goal from Svechnikov. I mean, that as watching that, you go, oh, here it goes. Here it goes. This lead is going
Yeah,
away.
you
And
definitely.
obviously it kind of felt like that in a sense. Like, oh, you get that early in the third period, the Hurricanes got some momentum. I also think a really good thing the Bruins did tonight was 5-on-5 play, which they and I'll put 5-on-5 play with secondary scoring, even though Coyle's goal was a power play goal. I still think when Coyle's getting you a goal, when Eric Hall is getting you a goal, when Derek Forbert's getting you a goal, I don't care how it comes. If those guys are scoring, you're winning. And you saw that. And this has been the thing this whole series. And Trags,
Of
you know
course.
this because you covered this team for so long. Like, their issue the past bunch of years is they get no secondary scoring once the playoffs start. You
Correct.
got secondary scoring tonight. Eric Holla gets one off that terrific Charlie McAvoy pass. How terrific has McAvoy been in this playoff series? You get Coyle on the power play, and you get Forbert shot from the point going in. If there's any ray of hope for Game 7, it is that you're getting secondary scoring in Game 6.
No question. And you brought up the goal by Halla. His line was so clutch in this game, and they brought this up on the TV broadcast, on the national broadcast on TNT. That the point you just made, the Bruins are going to need secondary scoring, and for a line like Halla's line and Lazar and Foligno to have the game that they did, certainly they didn't put up spectacular numbers. Lazar was a -1, Foligno break even at 0, but I just thought their play took some of the pressure off the top two lines, off Coyle and obviously the perfection line. It was important to see some of their depth come through, and not necessarily just producing goals, but producing on the forecheck, which when the Bruins are doing what they're doing well, they're forechecking.
Yes, I also think when the fourth line when goals are being scored when the fourth line is on the ice, it usually means they're forechecking well. And that was sort of the case on that Derek Forbort goal where they're just crashing the net hard. Foligno, I think, was like in the crease a few seconds before. Forbort kind of just throws the puck on net. And who cares how it went in, right? Like, again, it got tipped in by, I think it was Kotkaniemi who tipped it in. Doesn't matter. You're still there. You're still in havoc. And I think that's important. All these things, though, Trags, right? All these things we talk about. I think a lot of people's view going into Game 6 was the Bruins are supposed to win Game 6. That comes down to what the hell is supposed to happen in Game 7. And you kind of look at it now and you say, does a good Game 6 like this, right, where everything was right, Jeremy Swayman was solid. You know, he was shaky at a few times, like puck at the post a few times, but still, you get the win. He does what he's got to do. You get the secondary scoring. You get scoring from Brad Marchand, right? You get all these things. Does that still change the fact that the Bruins are not heavily favored in Game 7? Should this give hope that they could actually pull out a win in Game 7?
If they withstand the Carolina Hurricanes, literally and figuratively, in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game in Game 7, I think they've got a real chance to win this game, because what you want to do is you want to put a team with all of the expectations, and that's Carolina. Remember, you and me texted back and forth. We both thought that Carolina was probably even a better team than Florida coming into the playoffs. They were just so deep, so fast. Great coaching. I love Rod Brindamore. I just think he's a terrific, even keel, even tempered coach. But I thought Carolina had the best chance to come out of the East, maybe even more than Pittsburgh or the Rangers, who, forgot how to score until, it was just enough in time.
And cannot defend.
Correct. But this Carolina team is very good. And what you want to do is you want to put the pressure on them early in Game 7 and maybe even slip one past Ronta, and then quiet that crowd and get that crowd nervous. Again, we go back to 2011 in Game 7. The Bruins able to obviously score first because it was a shutout, but score first, put the crowd on its seats, back in their seats, and make them nervous. And that is palpable if you're playing in a game like that.
That'd be crazy if fans were on their seats. They'd be even more excited. They'd be up on their seats, standing on it. They'd be crazy tracked. But see, you miss this, don't you? You miss me just totally. You miss me twisting things.
I miss Stanley Cup hockey. I'm not going to lie. It's
yes.
Out here in Cincinnati, we've got the Blue Jackets, and obviously Sean Corrali country. But
yes,
they really didn't get a sniff of the playoffs because the East was so incredibly strong. It was, pretty much known who the 8 teams were going to be, by the end of March, right? I mean, we all knew who was going to be representing the Eastern Conference. We just didn't know where they would be bracketed and where they'd eventually finish in the standings. But we knew the 8 teams. So a team like Columbus really never had a shot, and they were kind of, playing with their roster and playing with prospects for the last month and a half of the season. And that's not something you see in Boston, obviously.
No.
And there's a lot of expectations on Butch Cassidy and this team. Obviously, the storyline is going to be Patrice Bergeron when and if the team loses in Game 7. If they go on to the second round, that storyline gets pushed into further into the offseason. So that's another thing to keep in mind on Saturday when Game 7 is played. How does Patrice Bergeron come out knowing that if he loses, like he knew going into Game 6, if he loses, it could be his last game in a Bruin uniform?
Yeah, I'm sure Bruins fans will react very rationally to a Game 7 loss on Twitter, of course. Especially the Bergeron angle is tough. The Bergeron thing is very interesting, and that's something I think I'll get to later in podcasts. We talk about Game 7 though, actually winning it. You mentioned coming out strong in the first 5 to 10 minutes, weathering the storm, so to speak. For me, I said this at the top of the show: have to score the first goal. Have to. There's no you absolutely 100% have to. And my guess is I actually think the Bruins are going to be very strong in those first 5 to 10 minutes. You saw that in Game 1 when they were down in Raleigh. You saw that in Game 2. They came out really strong and they just could not score. I think in Game 7, when you're kind of in that 5 to 10 minute zone of just forechecking hard, pushing the play, having Carolina on its heels, you have to score. Remember in game one, it was very early. It might have been Marchand or DeBrusque. The puck was on the goal line. Like they were, and I think
Mhm.
it's either Slavin or Pesci who knocked the puck off the goal line. Or it might have been Brady Shea who knocked the puck off the goal line. Obviously, the Bruins didn't score. They lose that game by a ton. Obviously, if that puck goes, it's a totally different game. I think in Game 7, you are absolutely going to see them come out strong like that. They just have to convert on one of those early chances, and you win Game 7. But again, if Carolina scores first in Game 7, I can almost promise you. Now this will get clipped and thrown against me if this doesn't happen. But I can almost promise you that if they don't score first in Game 7, they're gonna have a really bad time because again, they've been dominated in Carolina at times, and they again the scoreboard isn't always super accurate, but Carolina's won all 3 games there without issue. So,
I want
anyways,
one more thing before I let you go.
yes,
I
yes.
want to go back to the second period and how many shots Carolina was actually able to get on goal. 6. They only got 14 shots over the final 40 minutes of the game. They wound up with 25 shots for the game. You do that against a team like Carolina, you're going to have a good chance to win. And I think, block shots were a huge, huge part of the game on Thursday night in Game 6 for the Bruins. I thought the black and gold, as a lot of teams do, but when the Bruins are going well, they're giving up the body, they're blocking shots left and right. And I thought the Bruins did a great job of that on Thursday night.
But again, that goes back to what I said about them being a team that isn't close to the same when they're behind as when they're ahead. Like Marchand opened the second period with that goal, and they got 14 shots the rest of the game. Like that's again, they're not. It's funny. I have them in the Cup final. That was my initial bracket at the start of the playoffs. Like I do think they're built for the postseason. But again, the more I watch them and the more I see them go down, the more I'm like, are they built to go deep? Because again, they could easily win this series. Like I picked them at the start of the series to win it, right? In 7.
Right.
I might have changed my pick on Bruins beat. I might have changed it to Bruins in 7, but I had them at the beginning. My point is this. You can get past the first round, but after that, it becomes it becomes even tougher, obviously. So I just look at that and I go, I don't know. Mentally, I just don't see the Hurricanes as a super mentally tough team, even though they have a guy like veteran Jordan Staal, who's terrific, leading that team. So we'll see. That was Game 6, 5-2 the final. Game 7, Saturday. Trags, as always, we appreciate you. We love your hockey analysis from time to time. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Mike Petraglia. Make sure to keep it here for a Game 7 post-game show on Saturday.